The cage smelled like rust and fear, and Ilara had stopped counting the days since anyone had looked at her as something worth keeping. She pressed her spine against the cold metal bars, making herself small, a skill she'd perfected over 2 years and 3 packs. The transport wagon jolted over another rut in the road, and the Omega beside her whimpered. Ilara didn't reach out to comfort her. She'd learned that lesson the hard way. Attachments were just future wounds waiting to happen. Too weak, the Thornwood pack had declared before passing her along like spoiled meat. Too quiet, the River Basin wolves had agreed, as if her silence was a personal insult. Too strange, whispered everyone, everywhere, always. The rumours had grown teeth of their own by now. She was bad luck. A jinx. An Omega so thoroughly broken that even the moon goddess must have forgotten she existed. Maybe they were right. Ilara had stopped arguing with the universe a long time ago. Through the slats of the wagon she could see the capital rising in the distance, all gleaming spires and ancient stone, a city built on power and blood. The Royal Pack's territory. Her final destination. Charity collection, they called it. A pretty phrase for ugly business. Omegas deemed unfit for pack life, offered to the Alpha King's household as servants. Everyone in the wagon knew the truth. The Royal Pack didn't keep rejects for long. This was a death sentence dressed in mercy, and Ilara was done pretending otherwise. The wagon rolled to a stop in a courtyard, paved with stones older than memory. Guards barked orders. Rough hands pulled them out one by one, arranging them in a line like livestock at auction. Ilara kept her eyes down, her shoulders curved inward. Invisible. Forgettable. Safe. The other Omegas trembled beside her, 11 broken souls waiting to learn their fates. Some still held hope in their eyes. Ilara almost envied them. Then the air changed. It was subtle at first. A shift in pressure, like the moment before a summer storm breaks. The guards straightened. The whispers died. Even the birds in the courtyard trees fell silent. Footsteps echoed against stone. Ilara didn't look up. She didn't need to. She could feel him approaching like a force of nature, his presence rolling over the courtyard in waves. The other Omegas dropped to their knees instinctively, heads bowed. Ilara followed a half-second later, her body responding to pure alpha dominance before her mind could catch up. Alpha King Kaelin Blackwood. She'd heard the stories, of course. Everyone had. The youngest alpha to ever unite the continental packs. The warrior who'd ended the border wars with nothing but strategy and savagery. The king who famously rejected his fated mate 5 years ago, a noble alpha's daughter, beautiful and powerful, and never took another. The princess had died of bond sickness within a year. Some said Kaelin hadn't even attended her funeral. His footsteps grew closer. Ilara stared at the ground, counting the cracks between the paving stones. She heard him pause at the start of the line, exchange low words with someone, move on. Each step brought him nearer, and each step wound the tension in her chest tighter. Don't look up. Don't draw attention. Don't exist. The feet stopped in front of her. For a long moment, nothing happened. Ilara held her breath until her lungs burned. She could see his boots, black leather, well worn despite their obvious quality. A king who still walked his own battles. The observation floated through her mind like a leaf on water, meaningless and distant. Then she heard it. A low sound, almost subsonic. A growl that wasn't quite a growl, vibrating through the air like a physical thing. Her wolf, the pathetic, barely there creature that had never once risen to protect her, suddenly surged against her skin. Ilara gasped, shocked by the sensation she'd almost forgotten existed. Her head came up before she could stop it. Gold. His eyes blazed pure, molten gold, the wolf so close to the surface that his pupils had narrowed to slits. The Alpha King's entire body had locked in place, every muscle rigid, his chest heaving like he'd just sprinted a mile. He was younger than she'd expected, early 30s maybe, with a face that might have been handsome if it wasn't currently twisted into an expression of absolute shock. He scented the air, His nostrils flared. And then he whispered a single word that turned Ilara's blood to ice. Mate. No. No, 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 this wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. The word echoed in the suddenly silent courtyard like a death knell, and Ilara felt every pair of eyes swing toward her like physical blows. The other Omegas, the guards, the nobles who'd gathered to watch the inspection like it was entertainment, all of them staring at the worthless reject who'd somehow been claimed by the most powerful wolf on the continent. Terror clawed up her throat. She knew how this story ended. She'd heard it whispered in every pack that had discarded her. The Alpha King had rejected his fated mate once before, a princess, beautiful and worthy and everything Ilara would never be. He'd looked at that perfect alpha daughter and decided she wasn't worth keeping. And she had died for it. What chance did a broken Omega have? Ilara scrambled backward without thinking, her hands scraping against the rough stone. Her wolf, traitor that she was, howled in protest, straining toward the alpha before them. But Ilara had spent years learning to ignore that useless instinct. She'd spent years learning that hope was just another word for pain. No, she breathed, the word barely a whisper. Please, no. Something flickered across Kaelin's face. Pain, maybe, or confusion. His hand twitched at his side like he wanted to reach for her, and Ilara flinched so hard she nearly toppled over. Movement at the edge of her vision. A tall man with silver at his temples, the king's beta, she realized, stepped forward with barely concealed alarm. He leaned close to Kaelin's ear and whispered something urgent, too low for anyone else to hear. Whatever he said, it worked like a bucket of ice water. The gold bled from Kaelin's eyes. His expression shuttered completely, every trace of emotion locked away behind a mask of royal indifference. He straightened his shoulders, clasped his hands behind his back. When he looked at Ilara again, there was something unreadable in his gaze, something that might have been pain, might have been resignation, might have been nothing at all. Then he turned and walked away. Ilara's wolf keened, a sound of such raw anguish that she had to bite her lip to keep it from escaping her throat. Her hands shook against the cold stone. She waited for the guards to drag her to the servant quarters, or better yet, the gates. Surely he would send her away. Surely he would reject her publicly, as he'd rejected his princess, and let her fade into obscurity like she'd always wanted. But Kaelin paused at the edge of the courtyard. Without turning around, he gave a single command. Put her in the East Tower. A ripple of shock passed through the assembled crowd. Even the beta looked startled. The East Tower, Your Majesty? Someone dared to ask. No one speaks to her. Kaelin's voice was flat, empty. No one touches her. Then he was gone, disappearing into the palace like a shadow at noon. The East Tower. Ilara knew that name. Everyone knew that name. It was the most luxurious suite in the entire palace, reserved for visiting royalty and honoured guests. Crystal chandeliers and silk sheets and windows that overlooked the entire kingdom. It was also completely isolated, accessible only by a single staircase, sealed from the outside by 3 inches of enchanted oak, the most beautiful prison in the kingdom. Hands gripped her arms, gentle hands, she realized with distant surprise. The guards lifted her to her feet and began leading her toward the palace. The other Omegas stared as she passed, their expressions ranging from envy to pity to fear. None of them understood what had just happened. Ilara wasn't sure she understood either. Why not reject her outright? Why not send her away? Why lock her in a gilded cage instead of simply setting her free? As the palace doors closed behind her, she caught one last glimpse of the courtyard, one last glimpse of the world she was leaving behind. And for the first time in 2 years, Ilara felt something besides resignation. She felt afraid. Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Chapter 2. The East Tower was beautiful in the way a diamond was beautiful, cold, hard, and utterly indifferent to the warmth of living things. Ilara stood at the centre of her new prison, turning in a slow circle as the guards retreated and the heavy oak door groaned shut behind them. 3 locks clicked into place, one after another. And then silence fell like a shroud. The room was enormous. Vaulted ceilings arched overhead, painted with faded murals of wolves running beneath a silver moon. Crystal chandeliers caught the afternoon light and scattered it across walls papered in deep burgundy silk. A 4-poster bed dominated one corner, draped in velvet, the colour of midnight, while a marble fireplace crackled with flames that seemed to have been lit in anticipation of her arrival. It was the most luxurious space Ilara had ever seen. It made her skin crawl. She crossed to the windows, tall arched things that should have offered a stunning view of the capital below. But iron bars crisscrossed the glass from the outside, elegant scrollwork that couldn't quite hide its purpose, and when she tried the latch, it didn't budge. Bolted, sealed. No one speaks to her. No one touches her. The king's words echoed in her memory, and Ilara wrapped her arms around herself against a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. Why? The question circled her mind like a vulture waiting for something to die. Why not reject her publicly, the way he'd rejected Princess Serafina? Why not send her back to the servant quarters where she belonged? Why this? Why the silk sheets and the crystal chandeliers and the locks that kept her trapped inside beauty? Her wolf stirred restlessly beneath her skin, still agitated from the courtyard, still reaching towards something Ilara refused to acknowledge. She pressed her palm against her chest and willed the creature to be still. He's not ours, she thought fiercely. He doesn't want us. He made that perfectly clear. The wolf whined in disagreement but subsided. Night fell. Servants came and went through a smaller door she hadn't noticed, a service entrance that opened only from the outside. They brought food on silver trays, roasted pheasant, fresh bread, vegetables glistening with butter, enough to feed a family. They built up the fire and turned down the bed and lit candles in every corner until the room glowed like something from a fairy tale. Not one of them met her eyes. Not one of them spoke a single word. Ilara ate alone at a table meant for 12, the silence pressing against her ears like deep water. When she tried to thank a young maid for refilling her wine glass, the girl flinched like she'd been struck and scurried away without responding. Treated like royalty. Treated like a ghost. She supposed there wasn't much difference. Days passed. Or maybe weeks. Time moved strangely in the tower, marked only by the changing light through the barred windows and the parade of silent servants who tended to her needs. Ilara developed a routine out of necessity because routine was the only thing that kept madness at bay. She woke with the sun. She bathed in the enormous copper tub that somehow always contained steaming water, though she never saw anyone fill it. She ate whatever appeared on her breakfast tray. She walked the perimeter of her rooms, the bedroom, the sitting room, the small library filled with books whose spines had never been cracked, counting her steps until the numbers lost meaning. And she waited for the king. He didn't come. Not on the first day when Ilara jumped at every sound outside her door. Not on the third day, when she started talking to herself just to hear a human voice. Not on the 7th day, when she finally accepted that she might spend the rest of her life in this beautiful cage, attended by ghosts, forgotten by the wolf who'd claimed her. Mate. The word haunted her dreams. She saw golden eyes blazing in darkness, felt phantom hands reaching for her throat. Sometimes the hands were gentle, sometimes they weren't. She always woke gasping, her wolf howling for something she couldn't name. On the 10th day, Ilara decided she was done waiting. If she was going to be a prisoner, she would at least be an informed one. And gilded cages still had secrets, if you knew how to look. She started with the obvious places, the desk drawers, which contained nothing but blank parchment and dried-out ink. The wardrobe, stuffed with gowns that fit her perfectly despite no one taking her measurements. the bookshelves lined with volumes on history and poetry and the proper management of noble households. Nothing remotely useful or interesting. But the tower was old. Older than the current palace, according to the architectural history she found in one dusty corner of the library. And old buildings always had secrets. On the 12th day, she found the first one. She'd been running her hands along the walls, searching for hidden panels or hollow spaces, when her fingers caught on something near the main door. Grooves in the wood. Deep ones. Ilara crouched down, bringing her candle closer. Scratch marks. They ran from about waist height to the floor, 4 parallel lines repeated over and over, digging into the ancient oak like someone had tried to claw their way through solid wood. The marks were old, the edges worn smooth by time, but they were unmistakably deliberate, like someone had tried to get out, or like something had tried to stay in. Ilara's blood went cold. She traced one of the grooves with her fingertip, and her wolf pressed against her skin, suddenly alert, suddenly afraid. What happened here? She searched more carefully after that. In the corners, behind the furniture, beneath the rugs that covered the polished floors. And everywhere she looked, she found more evidence that her beautiful prison had a history darker than silk and crystal. More scratch marks, hidden behind a tapestry in the sitting room. A stain on the floorboards near the fireplace that no amount of scrubbing had been able to fully remove, rust-coloured and shaped like a handprint. A single word carved into the windowsill, so small she almost missed it. Remember. Remember what? The servants continued their silent routine, bringing food and fresh linens and never once acknowledging that anything was wrong. But Ilara watched them more carefully now. She noticed how they avoided certain corners of the room, how they flinched when they passed the main door, how one older woman made a warding sign whenever she thought Ilara wasn't looking, fingers pressed to lips, then heart, then forehead. Protection against evil, or protection against the dead. On the 15th night, Ilara finally heard them speak. She'd taken to pretending to sleep earlier than she actually did, lying still beneath the velvet covers while the servants completed their evening rounds. Usually they worked in perfect silence, but tonight, something had changed. "Shouldn't be here," a voice hissed from the sitting room. "Young, female, terrified. Hush!" An older voice, sharp with warning. "You know the rules." "But she looks just like—" "I said hush." Footsteps. A door closing. Then silence. Ilara's eyes flew open. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "She looks just like—" "Like who?" The question burned in her throat, but she forced herself to stay still, to wait. The servants wouldn't answer her questions. 2 weeks of trying had proven that much. She would have to find the answers herself. The next morning she searched the tower with new purpose. If she looked like someone, there might be a portrait, a photograph. Something that would explain the fear in the servant's voice, and the scratch marks on the door, and the word carved into the window like a warning. She found it behind the largest tapestry in her bedroom. The fabric was heavy, woven with an intricate scene of wolves hunting beneath a full moon. It hung from ceiling to floor, covering nearly the entire eastern wall, and Ilara had assumed it was simply decorative. But when she pulled back one corner, she found a wooden frame, a portrait. She yanked the tapestry aside, sending up a cloud of dust that made her eyes water. The canvas was large, nearly life-sized, depicting a woman in a crimson gown standing before a window that looked suspiciously like the ones in this very room. Ilara's breath stopped in her lungs. The woman was beautiful. Dark hair cascaded over her shoulders in waves. Pale skin glowed against the rich fabric of her dress. Full lips curved in the barest suggestion of a smile, something knowing and secretive lurking in her expression. But it was her eyes that made Ilara's knees buckle. Grey. Storm cloud grey, flecked with silver near the pupils. Ilara knew those eyes. She saw them every morning in the mirror. The woman in the portrait had her face. Not similar. Not resembling. Exactly the same. The same high cheekbones, the same pointed chin, the same slight asymmetry in the eyebrows that Elara had always secretly disliked. It was like looking at a painting of herself in expensive clothes, with expensive jewels draped around her throat. A small brass plaque was affixed to the bottom of the frame. Elara wiped away the dust with trembling fingers. Princess Seraphina Valdris, beloved of His Majesty King Caelan Blackwood. Princess Seraphina, the rejected mate, the one who died of bond sickness, alone and broken in her family's packlands. The cautionary tale that every wolf learned as a child. This is what happens when an alpha denies the sacred bond. This is the price of rejection. But the official story said she died far from here. So why was her portrait hidden in the East Tower, behind a tapestry that looked like it hadn't been moved in years? Why the claw marks on the door? Why the bolted windows? Why the terrified servants and the warding signs, and the word carved into the windowsill like a desperate prayer? Remember. Remember what? Remember who? Elara stared at her own face looking back at her from the canvas, and the ground beneath her feet felt suddenly uncertain, unstable. Like she was standing on ice that was beginning to crack. She had no memories before 3 years ago. She knew this about herself the way she knew the colour of her eyes and the sound of her own heartbeat. One day she had simply woken up in a ditch outside a border pack, covered in mud and blood, and with absolutely no idea how she'd gotten there. No name, no history, no pack bonds tugging at her consciousness. The wolves who found her had assumed she was a rogue Omega, brain-damaged maybe, or traumatized into amnesia by something too terrible to remember. They'd given her a name because she couldn't remember her own. Elara. It meant shining light, which was probably their idea of a joke. She'd never questioned it. What was the point? The past was gone. And the present was difficult enough without borrowing trouble from a history she couldn't access. But now she was staring at a dead princess who wore her face, locked in a tower where that same princess might have died, mated to the king who had supposedly rejected her years ago. "You smell like her," the king had said. Elara's hands shook so badly she had to grip the edge of the frame to stay upright. She didn't sleep that night. She sat in the chair by the fireplace, wrapped in a blanket that probably cost more than everything she'd ever owned, and watched the flames dance while her mind churned with impossible possibilities. The portrait watched her from across the room. She hadn't been able to bring herself to cover it again. Questions circled like carrion birds. Who was Princess Seraphina, really? How did she die? Why do we share a face? And beneath all of them, the most terrifying question of all. Am I her? It was impossible. It had to be impossible. The princess had been dead for 5 years. You couldn't come back from the dead. You couldn't forget your entire life and wake up as someone new in a ditch on the border. Could you? The fire burned down to embers. The candles guttered and died. Darkness crept into the corners of the room, and Elara's eyes grew heavy despite her churning thoughts. She was just beginning to drift when she felt it. A presence, heavy, overwhelming, pressing against her consciousness like a hand on her throat. Her eyes snapped open. He stood at the foot of her bed. King Caelan Blackwood, cast in silver moonlight streaming through the barred windows, watching her with eyes that blazed pure wolf gold. He was dressed in nothing but a loose shirt and dark trousers, his feet bare against the cold stone floor. His hands hung at his sides, fingers curled into fists, so tight she could see the tendons straining beneath his skin. He was trembling. Elara's heart started, hammered so loud she was certain he could hear it. "Your Majesty, you smell like her." His voice was raw, ragged, like it had been dragged over broken glass. Moonflowers and rain. She always smelled like moonflowers and rain. Elara didn't move, didn't breathe. The wolf inside her had gone completely still, watching, waiting, every nerve singing with a tension she didn't understand. Caelan took a step closer. Another. His eyes never left her face, tracking every micro-expression, every flutter of her pulse at her throat. Up close, she could see the shadows beneath his eyes, the hollows in his cheeks. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks, months, years. But you're not her. The words cracked, broke. You can't be her. I don't... Ilara's voice came out as a whisper. I don't understand. His hand rose, trembling violently, and for one heartbeat she thought he was going to touch her face. His fingertips hovered an inch from her cheek, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. Then he made a sound, half growl, half sob, and jerked backward like he'd been burned. You can't be her, he repeated, a desperate mantra. She's dead. I watched her die. I held her body in my arms and... He broke off, chest heaving, gold eyes wild with something that looked terrifyingly like madness. And then he was gone. One moment he was there, trembling at the foot of her bed. The next, the door was swinging shut behind him, and Ilara was alone with the racing of her heart and the impossible weight of his words. I watched her die. I held her body in my arms. She didn't sleep for the rest of the night. In the morning, the servants arrived as usual. They brought breakfast, fresh fruit, warm bread, tea that steamed fragrantly in a porcelain pot. They tidied the room and built up the fire and laid out fresh clothes for the day. None of them looked at her. None of them spoke. And when Ilara tried to ask about the king's visit, tried to demand answers about midnight appearances and dead princesses with stolen faces, they simply continued their work as if she hadn't spoken at all, as if nothing had happened, as if the king had never been there at all. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 3. 3 days passed after the king's midnight visit. 3 days of silence. 3 days of watching the door that never opened from the outside. 3 days of staring at the portrait of a dead princess who wore her face, waiting for answers that refused to come. On the 4th day, Ilara decided she was done waiting. The servants arrived at their usual time, a silent parade of downcast eyes and trembling hands. Ilara watched them work, cataloguing their movements, their patterns, the precise moment when the service door swung open to admit them. When the youngest maid, the one who had flinched at her voice 2 weeks ago, stepped through with a fresh stack of linens, Ilara moved. She was through the service door before anyone could react, bare feet slapping against cold stone, her borrowed nightgown streaming behind her like a banner of rebellion. Someone shouted. Footsteps thundered in pursuit. But Ilara had spent years learning to run, from packs that didn't want her, from wolves who saw her as prey, from a past she couldn't remember and a future she couldn't escape. She was very, very good at running. The servants' corridor twisted and turned, a maze of narrow passages designed to keep the help invisible. Ilara didn't know where she was going. She only knew that she had to find him, had to confront him, had to understand why a dead woman's face stared back at her from the mirror. She burst through a door and found herself in a corridor lined with portraits, kings and queens stretching back generations, their painted eyes following her as she sprinted past. Another door, a grand staircase, a hallway hung with tapestries depicting ancient battles, and then voices. Can't keep her locked away forever, Your Majesty. The council is asking questions. Let them ask. That voice, low and rough and edged with exhaustion. Ilara's wolf surged at the sound, straining toward it like a flower towards sunlight. She followed it to a set of massive double doors, carved with wolves and moons and symbols she didn't recognize. Guards flanked either side, their eyes widening as she approached. Miss, you can't. Ilara didn't stop. She hit the doors with both hands, and they swung inward like they'd been waiting for her. The room beyond was a study, walls lined with books, a fire crackling in an enormous hearth, maps spread across a table the size of a small boat, and standing beside that table, surrounded by advisors in various states of alarm, was the Alpha King. Kaelin's head snapped up. Gold flooded his eyes. "Everyone out," he said. His advisors exchanged uncertain glances. The Beta, the silver-templed man from the courtyard, stepped forward with concern etched across his features. "Your Majesty, perhaps out." The word cracked through the room like a whip. The advisors scattered, flowing around Ilara like water around a stone, their faces carefully blank. The doors closed behind them with a sound like a tomb sealing shut. Silence. Ilara stood in the center of the study, chest heaving, suddenly aware of how she must look. Barefoot, wild-haired, wearing nothing but a thin nightgown, facing down the most powerful wolf on the continent. She lifted her chin anyway. "You owe me answers." Kaelin's jaw tightened. He hadn't moved from his position by the table, but his entire body had gone rigid, every muscle locked in what looked like physical pain. His hands gripped the table's edge hard enough to make the wood groan. "You shouldn't be here." "No, I shouldn't. I should be in the servant quarters scrubbing floors, or dead in a ditch somewhere, or—" Her voice cracked. She forced it steady. "I shouldn't exist at all, should I? That's the problem. A worthless Omega with no past and no pack wearing the face of your dead mate." Something flickered in his golden eyes. Pain, or maybe recognition. "Go back to the tower, Ilara." "No." The word hung between them like a challenge. Kaelin's wolf rippled beneath his skin. She could see it, the way shadows moved across his features, the way his shoulders hunched like he was fighting to hold something back. "You don't understand what you're asking." "Then explain it to me." Ilara stepped closer and his whole body shuddered. "Explain why you've locked me in a dead woman's room. Explain the scratch marks on the door and the bolted windows and the servants who make warding signs when they think I'm not looking. Explain why you stand at the foot of my bed in the middle of the night, telling me I smell like her." His control cracked. One moment he was across the room, the next he was in front of her, moving faster than any wolf she'd ever seen. His hands closing around her upper arms with bruising force. His face was inches from hers, and his eyes were pure molten gold, no trace of human left in their depths. "You want to know what happened?" The words came out as a growl, vibrating through her bones. "You want to know why I kept you? Why I can't look at you without my wolf trying to tear out of my skin?" Ilara should have been afraid. She should have been terrified, trapped in the grip of an alpha so powerful that his mere presence made her knees want to buckle. But her own wolf was rising to meet him, and for the first time in her miserable life, she felt something other than the urge to submit. She felt angry. "Yes," she spat. "I want to know." His fingers tightened. His breath came in harsh pants against her face, and then, like a dam breaking, the words poured out. "I never rejected her." The statement hit Ilara like a physical blow. She stared at him, uncomprehending. "The official story," Kaelin continued, his voice ragged. "The one everyone believes. That I rejected Princess Seraphina because she wasn't worthy. That she died of bond sickness, alone and broken in her family's lands. It's a lie. All of it. Then what? I loved her." The admission seemed to cost him something. His grip loosened slightly, though he didn't let go. "From the moment I first saw her, I loved her. We were fated mates, yes, but it was more than that. She was everything. Brilliant. Fierce. The only person who ever looked at me and saw something other than a crown." Ilara's throat tightened. She didn't want to hear this. Didn't want to know about the love between this man and the woman whose face she wore like a stolen mask. But Kaelin wasn't finished. "Our mating ceremony was perfect. The entire kingdom celebrated. And that night," his voice broke, "that night, I took her to the East Tower, the traditional suite for royal matings. I thought we would finally complete the bond. I thought we would begin our life together." He released her suddenly, turning away like he couldn't bear to look at her face anymore. His shoulders heaved. "She waited until I was vulnerable. until I had dropped every defense, opened every wall. And then she drove a silver blade into my chest. Ilara's hand flew to her mouth. I should have died. Kaylin's voice had gone flat, empty. The blade missed my heart by less than an inch. I was bleeding out on the floor. And she stood over me and she smiled. Do you know what she said? He turned back to face her and the agony in his eyes was bottomless. She said, "The real Serafina died years ago. I'm just wearing her skin." The words echoed in the silent study. Ilara felt the ground tilt beneath her feet. I tried to grab her, to stop her, to demand answers, to understand what was happening, but I was too weak, too slow. His hands clenched at his sides. She walked to the window, the one I'd had specially commissioned, without bars, because I wanted my mate to see the stars on our first night together, and she threw herself out. Ilara's legs gave out. She hit the floor hard, her knees cracking against stone, but she barely felt it. Her mind was spinning, fragments of information colliding and reforming into patterns that made no sense. I held her body, Kaylin said quietly. I held her body until morning, until my beta found us and pried her from my arms. And for 5 years I've been searching for the truth. Who was she really? What did she mean? Where is the real Serafina if the woman I loved was just wearing her skin? He crouched down in front of her, his movements slow and careful, like approaching a wounded animal. And then you appeared, an Omega with no memories, no past, no pack, wearing the face of my dead mate and carrying a scent that makes my wolf want to crawl out of my body and claim you. His hand rose, hesitated, then gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The touch sent electricity crackling down her spine. Are you her? He whispered. The real Serafina? Are you a trick? A weapon? Some cruel joke the universe is playing on a king who couldn't protect the woman he loved? Ilara looked into his golden eyes and saw her own confusion reflected back at her. I don't know, she admitted. I don't remember anything before 3 years ago. I woke up in a ditch covered in blood, and I've been surviving ever since. I don't know who I am. I don't know why I have her face. Her voice cracked. I don't know anything. For a long moment neither of them spoke. The fire crackled. The wind howled outside the windows. And something shifted between them. Not trust, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of something that could become trust. Then we find out together, Kaylin said finally. Whatever you are, whoever you are, we find out together. The royal physician was an ancient wolf named Helena, with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. She arrived in Ilara's new quarters, a suite adjacent to the king's own chambers, because Kaylin had refused to let her return to the tower, carrying a leather bag stuffed with instruments and vials. Hold still, she commanded, pressing cold fingers against Ilara's temples. This won't hurt, but it will feel strange. Strange was an understatement. Helena's consciousness pressed against Ilara's mind like a wave against a seawall, probing, searching, examining every corner of her being. Ilara felt her wolf rise in response, hackles raised, but the physician's power was old and patient and utterly irresistible. Minutes passed. Hours, maybe. Ilara lost track of time. Suspended in a grey space between waking and dreaming while the physician conducted her examination. When she finally opened her eyes, Helena was staring at her with an expression Ilara had never seen on anyone's face before. Fear. Your Majesty, the physician said slowly, not taking her eyes off Ilara. I need to speak with you. Privately. Kaylin, who had been pacing by the fireplace like a caged beast, went still. Anything you have to say, you can say in front of her. I really don't think... Say it. Helena's weathered face tightened. She set down her instruments with deliberate care, buying herself time before finally speaking. She has 2 wolves. Silence. That's impossible, Kaylin said flatly. I know. Helena's voice was barely above a whisper. I've been practicing for 70 years, Your Majesty. I've examined thousands of wolves. I've read every medical text ever written about our kind. And I am telling you that this girl has 2 wolves inside her. One active, one dormant. 2 distinct spiritual signatures sharing one body. Ilara's head spun. 2 wolves! 2 wolves! The words bounced around her skull without finding purchase. The active wolf is the one you can sense, Helena continued. Weak, yes. Damaged, possibly. But functional. She's the one who responds to your bond, Your Majesty. She's the reason your wolf recognizes this girl as mate. And the dormant one? Helena's face went pale. The dormant wolf carries a bloodline I've only ever read about in history books. A bloodline that hasn't existed in 300 years. She swallowed hard. The Silver Moon line. The original royal family. Supposedly extinct since the purge of blood. Kaelin's breath caught. Ilara saw his hands tremble before he clenched them into fists. You're certain? As certain as I can be. The markers are unmistakable. Silver in the spiritual signature. A lunar resonance that predates our current dynasties. Whoever put this wolf inside this girl, Helena shook her head slowly. They had access to something that shouldn't exist anymore. Something that was supposed to have been destroyed centuries ago. Ilara found her voice. What does this mean? What was the Silver Moon line? Helena looked at her with something like pity. The Silver Moons were the first wolves. The original bloodline, created by the moon goddess herself. They ruled for 1,000 years before the Great War, and they had abilities that no modern wolf can match. Healing. Prophecy. The power to command other wolves with a word. She paused. They were also said to be immortal. Not unkillable, but unable to age. Unable to die of natural causes. They were hunted to extinction during the purge, Kaelin added quietly. The other noble families banded together, terrified of their power. Every Silver Moon wolf was killed. Every child, every elder, every trace of their bloodline erased. Or so we thought, Helena said. But if this dormant wolf is truly of Silver Moon descent, then someone preserved that bloodline, hid it, kept it alive for 300 years. And put it inside me, Ilara whispered. No one answered. No one needed to. The message arrived at sunset. A servant brought it to Kaelin's study, where Ilara had been sitting in stunned silence while the king and his advisors argued about what to do with her. The servant's hands shook as he presented the sealed envelope, and Ilara noticed that his face had gone the colour of old milk. This came by private courier, Your Majesty, from the Valdris estate. The room went quiet. Kaelin took the envelope like it might explode. The seal on the back was familiar. Ilara had seen it in the corner of Seraphina's portrait, the Valdris family crest. Lord Ashford is dead, the beta said slowly. He died of grief within a year of his daughter's death. Apparently not. Kaelin broke the seal and unfolded the letter. His eyes moved across the text, and with each line his expression grew darker. When he finished, he looked at Ilara with something that might have been fear. What does it say? She asked. Kaelin set the letter down on his desk with exaggerated care, like he was afraid his hands might crush it. Lord Marcus Ashford is alive. He's been in hiding for the past 4 years and he's been searching for something. Kaelin's voice was carefully controlled. He calls it the vessel. Ilara's blood ran cold. He knows you exist, Ilara. He knows you're here, in my palace. Kaelin met her eyes and she saw the wolf burning behind his human mask. And he's coming to reclaim what belongs to him. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 4. The man who claimed to be her father had eyes like a snake, patient, cold, and utterly without warmth. Ilara watched from the shadows of the throne room as Lord Marcus Ashford swept through the palace doors with 50 armed soldiers at his back and a smile that never reached his gaze. He was tall and lean, with silver-streaked hair and the kind of aristocratic features that belonged on coins or portraits. Handsome, in a sharp and dangerous way. Looking at him made her skin crawl. "Your Majesty." Ashford's bow was precisely calibrated, deep enough to show respect, shallow enough to suggest equality. "I come bearing truths that will shake the very foundations of your kingdom, and I come to claim what was stolen from me." Kaelan sat on the throne like he'd been carved from stone, his face betraying nothing. But Elara could feel his wolf through the tentative bond that had been growing between them these past days. It was pacing, agitated, ready to tear out throats at the slightest provocation. "You were reported dead, Lord Ashford, grief-stricken after your daughter's passing. A necessary deception." Ashford's smile widened, and Elara's stomach turned. "I had enemies, Your Majesty, powerful ones. They had already taken so much from me. I couldn't risk them taking what little I had left." "And what exactly do you have left?" Ashford's eyes swept the room until they found Elara, half hidden behind a marble pillar. The weight of his gaze hit her like a physical blow, and her wolf, the weak, damaged one that had never protected her from anything, whimpered and tried to retreat. "My daughter," Ashford said softly. "My true daughter. The one who should have been your queen." The story he told was impossible. It was also, Elara realized with growing horror, terrifyingly plausible. The Princess Seraphina that you knew was never real. Ashford stood before the assembled council, playing to his audience like a master performer. She was a changeling, a duplicate created through forbidden blood magic, a copy implanted with false memories and designed to infiltrate the royal line. Murmurs rippled through the council chamber. Elara pressed herself against the wall, trying to make herself invisible while every word out of Ashford's mouth rewrote her understanding of the world. "Why?" Kaelan's voice cut through the whispers like a blade. "Why would anyone do this?" "Power, Your Majesty. What else?" Ashford spread his hands in a gesture of helpless honesty. "I had enemies who wanted access to the throne. They took my daughter, my real daughter, and replaced her with a magical construct. A puppet they could control. And the real Seraphina? Hidden away. Her memories suppressed, her wolf bound, kept in a state of living death until they had no more use for her." Ashford's voice cracked with what might have been genuine emotion. "I searched for years. When I finally found the trail, my enemies attacked. My household was destroyed. And my daughter..." He looked at Elara again, and she saw something hungry in his expression. "My daughter was lost, cast out into the world with no memories, no protection, no one to tell her who she really was." The council erupted into chaos. Voices rose and fell, questions hurled like weapons. Through it all, Kaelan sat motionless on his throne, watching Ashford with eyes that had gone cold and calculating. Elara's mind raced. The story fit. It explained the portrait, the matching face, the two wolves Helena had found inside her. It explained why she'd woken in a ditch 3 years ago with nothing but blood on her hands and a void where her memories should be. It explained everything. So why did every instinct she possessed scream that it was wrong? "I don't trust him." Kaelan stood at the window of his private chambers, staring out at the courtyard below, where Ashford's soldiers had made camp. His shoulders were rigid with tension. "Neither do I," Elara admitted. She sat on the edge of a velvet chair, her hands clasped in her lap to hide their trembling. "But his story is convenient." Kaelan turned to face her, and she saw the war playing out behind his eyes. Too convenient. A loving father searching for his stolen daughter. A tragic tale of enemies and blood magic and lost princesses. He shook his head. "It's a fairy tale, and I've learned to be suspicious of fairy tales. But if it's true, If it's true, then you're the woman I was always meant to be with. You're an innocent victim, and everything I've suffered for 5 years has been because of someone else's manipulation." He crossed to her, kneeling so they were eye level. "If it's true, Ilara, then we get a second chance. Don't you think I want to believe that?" His hand found hers, and warmth spread through her chest despite everything. "But," he continued quietly, "I watched a woman with your face try to kill me. I held her body after she threw herself from a tower. And now her father, who was supposed to be dead, appears with a perfect explanation and a demand that I hand you over to his custody." His grip tightened. "Something is wrong. I can feel it." Ilara thought about Ashford's eyes, the hunger in them, the way he'd looked at her not like a father reuniting with a lost child, but like a man reclaiming stolen property. "I feel it too," she whispered. The council meeting the next morning was a disaster. Ashford had spent the night cultivating allies. He had old debts, old friendships, old secrets, the currency of political power. By the time the sun rose, half the council was openly advocating for Ilara to be released into his care. "She is his daughter by blood," Lord Mercer argued, his jowls quivering with indignation. "A father has rights." "She is my mate," Kaelin growled, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "A mate you've kept locked in a tower for weeks." Lady Ashworth's voice dripped with false concern. "The same tower where your first mate died. Forgive me, Your Majesty, but the optics are troubling." "I was protecting her." "From what? From whom?" Ashford spread his hands, the picture of wounded innocence. "I only want to reunite with my daughter, to help her recover her memories and her birthright." "Is that so terrible?" Kaelin's wolf was so close to the surface that Ilara could see gold bleeding into his eyes. His control was slipping, and the council could sense it. They were circling like sharks, scenting blood. "Perhaps a compromise," suggested the beta, ever the diplomat. "Lady Ilara could remain in the palace while Lord Ashford is given supervised visitation." "Unacceptable." Ashford's pleasant mask flickered for just a moment, and Ilara saw something dark beneath it. "My daughter has been through enough. She needs to be with family, with people who love her." Love. The word hit Ilara like a thunderbolt, and suddenly she wasn't in the council chamber anymore. She was somewhere dark, cold stone beneath her back, hands holding her down while pain exploded across her shoulders, her spine, her very soul. Someone was carving something into her flesh, and she was screaming, screaming, screaming. And through the agony, a voice. Calm, measured, familiar. The vessel must be emptied before it can be filled. Ilara gasped, jerking back to the present. She was on the floor. When had she fallen? And Kaelin was crouching beside her, his face tight with worry. The council members had risen from their seats, expressions ranging from concern to calculation. And Lord Ashford was watching her with something like satisfaction. "My poor girl," his voice oozed sympathy. "The trauma of her ordeal, manifesting in these episodes. All the more reason she needs proper care. Family care." His voice. It was his voice. Ilara looked up at the man claiming to be her father, and memory crashed through her like a tidal wave. Darkness, chains, symbols carved into her back while she writhed and begged for mercy. And, through it all, that voice, that exact voice. The vessel must be emptied before it can be filled. She opened her mouth to speak, to accuse, to scream the truth that was finally, horrifically clear. But Ashford met her eyes, and his pleasant smile never wavered, and she saw the warning there, the promise of what would happen if she spoke, and her voice died in her throat. That night, Ilara dreamed of silver light. She stood in a forest she'd never seen, surrounded by wolves she didn't recognize. They were massive, larger than any wolf should be, with fur that shimmered like moonlight on water. They watched her with ancient eyes, and she felt their judgment like a physical weight. "You are the last," they said without speaking, the final vessel, the end and the beginning. What am I? She tried to ask, but she had no voice. You are what they made you. You are what they stole. You are what they fear. The largest wolf stepped forward, and its eyes were twin moons burning in the darkness. Wake, little sister. Wake and remember. Wake and become. Pain. Ilara jerked awake with a scream already tearing from her throat. Something was wrong. Something was breaking inside her, shattering, reforming. Her bones cracked and reset. Her skin split and healed. Her wolf, not the weak one, not the damaged one, but the other one, the dormant one, the one that had slept for 300 years, roared to life. The shift took her without warning or mercy. She had never shifted properly. Her weak wolf had never been strong enough for a full transformation. But this wasn't a normal shift. This was something else entirely. Something ancient. Something that shouldn't exist anymore. Her spine curved impossibly. Her skull reshaped itself. Fur erupted across her skin, not brown or black or grey, but pure gleaming silver, bright as starlight. She grew. And grew and grew. When it was over, when the pain finally faded, Ilara opened her eyes and saw the world in colours that had no names. She was a wolf, but not any wolf she'd ever seen or heard of or imagined. She was massive, twice the size of the largest alpha, her silver fur shimmering with an internal light that filled the chamber. Her paws were the size of dinner plates. Her teeth could crush bone like chalk. And inside her, something ancient finally woke. She felt it uncurl in her chest. Power older than kingdoms, older than histories, older than the very concept of packs and alphas and omegas. The silver moon bloodline, the original wolves, the children of the moon goddess herself. Mine, the ancient thing whispered. This power, this legacy, this destiny. Mine. No, ours. The door burst open. Kaelan stood in the entrance, chest heaving, eyes blazing gold. He'd felt it. Of course he'd felt it. The bond between them was singing like a plucked string, resonating with harmonics that shook the very air. He saw her, saw what she'd become. And his wolf responded, not with dominance, not with challenge, not with the alpha command that brought lesser wolves to their bellies, with recognition, with surrender. The Alpha King, the most powerful wolf on the continent, dropped to his knees before her. His head bowed, his throat bared. "My queen," he whispered, and the words carried the weight of prophecy. Ilara's silver wolf looked down at the Alpha kneeling before her, and something clicked into place. Something that had been broken for 300 years finally healed. She threw back her massive head and howled. The sound shattered every window in the palace. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 5. The howl still echoed in her bones when Ilara shifted back. She collapsed naked on the cold stone floor, her body trembling with aftershocks of power she didn't understand. Kaelan was beside her in an instant, wrapping his coat around her shoulders, gathering her against his chest like she might shatter if he let go. "What's happening to me?" Her voice came out raw, barely human. "I don't know." His arms tightened. "But we'll figure it out. Together." The door crashed open again. Guards flooded the room. Followed by Helena, followed by the Beta, followed by Lord Ashford. He stood in the doorway, and for the first time since his arrival, his pleasant mask had slipped entirely. He stared at Ilara with an expression of naked hunger that made her stomach revolt. "It's happening," he breathed. "After all these years, it's finally happening." Kaelan rose to his feet, positioning himself between Ilara and Ashford. His wolf was so close to the surface that his voice came out as a growl. "What did you do to her?" "What I was born to do. what my family has worked toward for 300 years. Ashford's eyes never left Ilara. You beautiful, perfect vessel. You have no idea what you are, do you? What you're about to become. Guards, Kaelin snarled. Seize him. But Ashford was already moving. He pulled something from his coat, a vial of dark liquid that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and threw it at the floor. Where it shattered, shadows exploded outward, thick and choking and wrong. The guards cried out. Helena stumbled backward. Even Kaelin staggered, his alpha strength meaning nothing against magic that predated his bloodline. Only Ilara remained standing. The shadows parted around her like water around a stone, and she felt something stir in her chest, something ancient, something that recognized this power and remembered how to fight it. You can't resist it, Ashford said, advancing through the chaos. The ritual is already in motion. It began the moment your dormant wolf awakened. Queen Lysandra is rising, and there's nothing you can do to stop her. Lysandra. The name hit Ilara like a physical blow. Images flooded her mind, not memories exactly, but impressions. A woman with silver hair and moonlight eyes, standing before a throne, blood on her hands, betrayal in her heart. A curse screamed into the darkness as enemies closed in around her. I will return. I will have my vengeance. The Blackwood line will burn. No, Ilara gasped, clutching her head. No, I'm not. I'm not her. Not yet. Ashford smiled, and it was the cruelest thing she'd ever seen. But you will be. You were bred for this, little vessel. Generations of careful bloodlines, precise rituals, all leading to this moment. The silver moon will rise again, and Lysandra will finally complete her revenge. He grabbed her arm before she could react, his fingers burning where they touched her skin. The shadows surged, wrapping around them both, and the world dissolved into darkness. When Ilara opened her eyes, she was in hell. No, not hell. A ritual chamber carved from black stone, lit by torches that burned with silver flame. Symbols covered every surface. The same symbols she'd seen in her fractured memories, the same ones she could feel carved into her back. A circle had been drawn in the center of the floor in what looked horribly like blood. And standing around that circle were a dozen figures in dark robes, chanting in a language older than any Ilara had ever heard. Ashford dragged her to the center of the circle and threw her down. The moment her skin touched the blood-drawn lines, agony exploded through her body. The vessel is prepared, Ashford intoned, taking his place at the head of the circle. The bloodline is ready. Let the silver moon rise. Let Queen Lysandra walk again. The chanting intensified. The symbols on the floor began to glow with sickly light. And inside Ilara's mind, something massive started to wake. No, she thought desperately. No, please, I don't want this. But want had nothing to do with it. Lysandra's consciousness crashed into hers like a tidal wave. 3 centuries of rage and grief and betrayal compressed into a single devastating assault. Ilara felt herself being pushed down, pushed aside, her identity dissolving under the weight of an ancient queen's endless fury. You are nothing, Lysandra's voice echoed in her skull. You are a vessel, a container. You exist only to hold me. No. The Blackwoods destroyed everything I loved. They slaughtered my people, erased my legacy, built their dynasty on the bones of my children. And now I will destroy them in turn, starting with their precious king. Images flooded Ilara's fragmenting consciousness. Kaelin's face, Kaelin's heart, Lysandra's hands around his throat, squeezing until the light left his eyes. No! The force of her refusal was so violent that for a moment, just a moment, the pressure eased. Ilara gasped for breath she shouldn't need inside her own mind, and she grabbed that momentary reprieve with both hands. She could feel Lysandra's consciousness pressing against hers, vast and terrible and ancient. But she could also feel something else. A golden thread, faint but unbreakable, stretching through the darkness. The mate bond. Kaelan. He came for her like a force of nature. Later, Elara would hear the stories, how the Alpha King had torn through Ashford's shadow magic with nothing but will and fury, how he'd tracked her through the ancient tunnels beneath the palace, how he'd killed 6 of Ashford's guards with his bare hands. In the moment, all she knew was that 1 second she was drowning, and the next, he was there. Kaelan burst through the chamber doors in full wolf form, massive and black and blazing with golden light. His eyes found hers across the ritual circle, and even through Lysandra's suffocating presence, Elara felt the bond between them sing. "You can't stop this," Ashford shouted, his composure finally cracking. "The ritual is already in motion. Lysandra will rise, and there's nothing." Kaelan shifted mid-stride and kept running, crossing the distance between them in seconds. His hands cupped Elara's face, tilting her chin until their eyes met. "I can't break the ritual," he said, his voice rough with desperation, "but I can anchor you." "What?" "The mate bond, fully formed, completely sealed. It will tether your soul to mine." His thumbs traced her cheekbones, and she saw fear in his golden eyes. "It's a gamble. If Lysandra takes over completely, she'll have access to me through the bond. She could destroy us both from the inside." "Do it," Lysandra's voice commanded, cold with anticipation. "Give me access to his soul. It will make the vengeance so much sweeter." But beneath the ancient queen's cruelty, Elara heard something else, something that sounded almost like doubt. "I trust you," Kaelan whispered. "I trust what we could be. Take the bond, Elara. Come back to me." He kissed her. And the world caught fire. The mate bond completed with a force that shattered reality. Elara felt it snap into place, golden light flooding through her veins, wrapping around her heart, anchoring her to Kaelan with chains that could never be broken. She felt his love, his fear, his desperate hope. She felt his wolf reaching for hers, not to dominate, but to support, to steady, to hold. And then she fell, not outward, but inward, down into the depths of her own consciousness, where something ancient and terrible waited. The space inside her mind had transformed. What had been a formless void was now a throne room, silver and gleaming, lit by moonlight that streamed through windows that shouldn't exist. And sitting on a throne carved from crystal was Queen Lysandra. She was beautiful, in a terrible way. Silver hair cascaded past her shoulders, moonlight eyes burned with 3 centuries of captive fury. A crown of frozen starlight sat upon her brow. But when Elara looked closer, she saw something she hadn't expected. Exhaustion. "You should not be here," Lysandra said, her voice echoing strangely. "The bond should not have been strong enough to anchor you." "You sound disappointed." The ancient queen's lips twisted. "I sound tired. Do you have any idea what it's like, little vessel? To be ripped from death over and over? To have your soul harvested, your power used, your rage weaponized by the same bloodline that claims to serve your vengeance?" Elara stared at her. "The Ashfords. They found me 3 centuries ago, when my spirit was still raw with betrayal. They promised me revenge. They promised me justice." Lysandra's hands tightened on the arms of her throne. "Instead, they've kept me chained, used me, forced me into vessel after vessel, harvesting my power while feeding me just enough hope to keep me compliant." "You're not a queen," Elara realized slowly. "You're a prisoner, just like me." Something flickered in Lysandra's ancient eyes, something that might have been recognition. "The Ashfords told me the Blackwoods were monsters. They showed me visions of atrocities, fed my hatred for 300 years. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "But the bond you just formed, the mate bond with the Blackwood King, I felt it. I felt his soul. And he loves you." The words seemed to cost her something. Not the power you might hold, not the vengeance I could bring, He loves you, the broken Omega, with no memories, and no pack, and no worth. He would die for you. He nearly did. Ilara's throat tightened. What are you saying? Lysandra rose from her throne. Up close, she looked even more tired, the weight of 3 centuries pressing down on features that had once been proud and fierce. I'm saying I'm done. The words hung in the silver air between them. I've been angry for 300 years. I've been used for 300 years, and I'm so tired, little vessel. So tired of being a weapon. So tired of being a tool. So tired of existing when everything I loved has been dust for centuries. What do you want? Ilara asked. Lysandra's moonlight eyes met hers, and for the first time, they held something other than rage. I want to rest. I want to finally die. She reached out, her incorporeal fingers hovering over Ilara's heart. But I won't simply fade. 300 years of power don't just disappear. Someone has to take it. Ilara's breath caught. Take it? My power, my memories. Everything the Ashfords have been harvesting all these years. I can give it to you, freely, not through force. Lysandra's smile was sad. Or you can refuse, and we'll both be vessels forever. Trapped in this cycle until another Ashford decides to use us. If I accept, you'll know everything. Every atrocity the Ashford family has committed in my name. Every vessel they've sacrificed. Every lie they've told. Lysandra's form began to flicker. And you'll have power. Real power. Not the borrowed scraps they fed you, but the full force of the Silver Moon bloodline. Ilara thought about the choice being offered. Power she'd never asked for. Memories that weren't her own. A legacy of violence and vengeance that had nothing to do with the Omega who'd woken in a ditch 3 years ago. But she also thought about Kaelin, waiting for her on the other side of consciousness. About the bond between them, golden and unbreakable, about the chance to finally be something other than a vessel. Will it hurt? She asked. Lysandra's laugh was tired but genuine. Probably. But you've survived worse. She had. She really had. Ilara reached out and took the ancient queen's hand. The power hit her like a supernova. Images and memories flooded through her, 300 years compressed into a single devastating instant. She saw everything. The original Silver Moon court, gleaming and powerful, the betrayal that had brought them down, the Ashford family's scheming, generation after generation, harvesting Lysandra's power while pretending to serve her cause. She saw the vessels, dozens of them, stretching back through the centuries. Women bred like cattle, their identities erased, their bodies used and discarded. She saw herself as an infant, carved with symbols before she could speak. She saw her mother dying on a ritual table while Ashford watched with clinical detachment. And she saw Lysandra, finally free. Thank you, the ancient queen whispered, her form dissolving into silver light. Use the power better than I did. Choose love over vengeance. Choose yourself over the chains they tried to wrap around you. How? Ilara asked. But Lysandra was already gone, fading into the moonlight she'd come from. Finally, at peace. Ilara opened her eyes. The ritual chamber was chaos. Ashford's followers were scattered, many of them fleeing, others lying unconscious on the blood-stained floor. The symbols had stopped glowing. The silver flames had died. And she was standing in the center of it all, power flowing through her veins like liquid starlight. Kaelin was on his knees a few feet away, staring at her with an expression of terrified hope. Behind him, the palace guards had finally broken through, filling the chamber with steel and shouted orders. Ilara looked down at her hands. They were glowing, faintly, with silver light that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. Ilara? Kaelin's voice cracked on her name. Is it you? She looked at him. At the man who had kissed her in the middle of impossible odds, who had offered his soul as an anchor, who had loved her when she was nothing but a broken Omega with a stolen face. It's me, she said, and her voice resonated with power she was only beginning to understand. It's really me. Ashford chose that moment to run. He'd been edging toward a hidden passage, using the chaos as cover. But Ilara felt him move, felt his heartbeat, his fear, his desperate calculation. The power Lysandra had given her responded without conscious thought. Silver light wrapped around Ashford's ankles and dragged him to the ground. You, she said, walking toward him as he scrambled and clawed at the stone, kept me in chains. You carved symbols into my back before I could speak. You killed my mother on a ritual table. You spent generations harvesting a dead queen's power while pretending to serve her vengeance. She crouched down, meeting his terrified eyes with her own, silver now, blazing like twin moons. And you thought you could keep doing it forever? Please, he gasped. Please, I can explain. I already know everything. She straightened, gesturing for the guards to take him. And so will the kingdom, when you stand trial for 300 years of atrocities. They dragged him away, screaming. The aftermath was a blur. Healers, explanations, council meetings that stretched into the early hours of the morning. Through it all, Kaelan stayed at her side, his hand wrapped around hers like he was afraid she might disappear. Finally, as dawn began to paint the sky in shades of rose and gold, they found themselves alone. They stood on a balcony overlooking the capital, the city spread out below them like a tapestry of life and light. Ilara's silver power had faded to a gentle glow, but she could still feel it humming beneath her skin, still feel the ancient bloodline that was now truly hers. Kaelan turned to face her, and then, slowly, deliberately, he knelt, not as a king to an omega, not as an alpha to a lesser wolf, as a mate to an equal. I spent 5 years mourning a lie, he said, his golden eyes meeting hers. 5 years believing I'd failed the woman I loved. 5 years punishing myself for something that was never real. Kaelan, I won't waste another moment on anything but the truth. He reached for her hand, pressing it against his chest, where his heart beat steady and strong. You are not a vessel. You are not a weapon. You are not a lost princess or an ancient queen or a pawn in someone else's game. You are Ilara. And I love you. Her throat tightened with emotions she was only beginning to understand. She looked down at the man kneeling before her, the Alpha King, the warrior, the mate who had walked through fire to bring her home. She took his hand and pulled him to his feet. Then let's start with this truth, she said, as the silver in her eyes met the gold in his. I choose you. Not because the bond demands it. Not because fate or prophecy or 3 centuries of scheming led us here. Because I want to. She kissed him as the sun rose over the kingdom, and for the first time in her life, she felt whole. The celebration lasted 3 days. The kingdom rejoiced. The Alpha King had found his true mate, the Silver Moon bloodline had risen, and a conspiracy 3 centuries old had finally been exposed. Ashford languished in the dungeons awaiting trial. His followers had scattered to the winds. Everything was perfect. Until the morning a servant delivered a message to the royal chambers. Ilara was still half asleep when Kaelan's sharp intake of breath brought her fully awake. She sat up, finding him standing at the window, a piece of paper clutched in his trembling hand. What is it? He turned to face her, and she saw something in his expression that made her blood run cold. Fear. The handwriting, he said hoarsely. It's Seraphina's. Ilara's heart stopped. That's impossible. The changeling is dead. She threw herself from the tower 5 years ago. I know. Kaelan handed her the paper, and she saw that his hands were shaking. But this was dated 2 days ago. Ilara looked down at the elegant script, at words that shouldn't exist. My dearest Kaelan, the changeling didn't die. I've been healing, hiding, waiting. But I'm ready now. I'm coming home. And I want what's mine. S. The paper crumpled in Ilara's fist, and silver light blazed in her eyes. Let her come, she said quietly. I'm not a vessel anymore. and I don't share. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe, like, and share this video to continue listening to this type of story daily and also to appreciate this community too. I would like to hear your wonderful opinion about this story. Please comment below.